Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for today, Mitigating the Potential Impacts of Stormwater Pollutants on the Environment. Thank you all for attending. My name is Karen Hamill. I'm a regulatory expert and trainer for HalenHardy. So today we're going to look at some of the most common causes of pollution in the environment, and those are most often oils, fuels, petroleum products, and sediment that enter our stormwater through different things that we may do at our facility, whether they are intentional or unintentional. Sometimes those things happen that we have the ability to control so that they're not having the impact on our environment. So let's begin with looking at where spills happen. And this is something that if you've got a robust stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWIP, or if you've got an SPCC plan, which is spill pollution control and countermeasure plan. These are things that you may have already looked at. These are things that you may have already found at your facility, but let's take a look at them and review some of the places where you may have the potential for spills to happen at your facility. Not that they can't happen other places, but these are some of the most likely places for spills to happen. So the first place that spills can happen are at fuel dispensing areas. So this would be close to tanks. This could be underground tanks, anywhere that you are either pumping fuel in or out of a tank. So this could be fueling equipment. This could be fueling vehicles, whatever, fueling generators, wherever you're moving that fuel from a tank or from a holding area into a piece of equipment or a vehicle. So look at those areas at your facility. For most people, that may be one area. For some people, it may be several areas, depending on the size or the scope of your facility. The next area to look at would be saddle tanks. And this would be on moving equipment, mostly vehicles or power moving equipment, whatever that might be, construction vehicles. Saddle tanks are very prone to failure. And the hard part about these is this is something that you're probably not going to find on your facility plan, because chances are that equipment is moving around from day to day. It may be moving in and out of your facility. It may be moving just around your facility. But have a plan for what you want to do with those vehicles or the equipment that does have saddle tanks, because that's something that, because it's a moving target, is harder, but very prone to failure. In fact, that's one of the most common things that local responders are responding to these days are failed saddle tanks. People take a corner too tight, people graze them with something, and they're just one of those things prone to failure. And because they're not at a fixed site, they may be a little bit harder, but we'll take a look at a way to take care of those a little more readily as we go on in the slides. Next area to look at are hydraulic systems. What equipment do you have? What pieces of tooling that you may have? Anything that may have hydraulics associated with it. This could be lifts, it could be power transmissions, it could be whatever happens to have that oil in it. Hydraulics are something that, even with a lot of preventative maintenance, even if we do keep up with those things, something that is prone to failure, usually at the time where we absolutely don't need it or want it to. But where are those hydraulics? Are they in fixed locations, or are they kind of like the saddle tanks? Are they something that's going to move around throughout the facility or in and out of the facility? Something that may be a little bit harder to plan for, but again, another common cause of spills. Bulk liquid storage areas, now these tend to be fixed. You're usually not moving these around a lot, but bulk liquid areas, this might be where you're storing your fuel, where you're storing oil, maybe where you're storing other chemicals. Usually they're surrounded by a secondary containment system. You can kind of see that in the photo here, that red berm is that secondary containment area. Usually it is nice that they do have the secondary containment, but it is an area that can be prone to different attacks to it. So this is something that maybe you have a perimeter around the area or a fence around the area to prevent people from getting up close to it. But this is something that usually we don't see failing a lot. And the only times we really see a lot of failure there is if they haven't been maintained, or if it's in a storm situation or a result of a natural disaster. But again, something that can cause spills and something that you do need to be aware of. chances are good that these are marked and located very well on your facility plans. The next one are pipe fittings and connections. If you've got pipelines through your facility, if you have any potential for conveyances to leak, anytime you've got a connection, a valve, an opening, a fitting, those are all kind of key points that you might want to check out on a routine basis, just so that you have the ability to keep those well maintained so that they aren't leaking. Sometimes it's just the nature of the beast that those are the points that are always going to leak for you. And there are things that you can do to capture those leaks so that they don't get into the environment. Next one are secondary containment system drains. Now in this picture, this drain actually goes to an underground sump, but most often you'll see those secondary containment drains within the sidewall of the berm system. But the thing about these is quite often people will forget to put that tap back into play, put the bung cap back in, whatever the case may be, turn the valve back off. But when we forget to do that, that makes that system vulnerable anytime there is a storm. If there would happen to be a release within your secondary containment system, there is the potential for that to get into the environment if we do forget those valves. The next area are vehicle and equipment maintenance areas. This would be for fleets, anybody who's got an operation where they're servicing their equipment on site, or they are looking at servicing equipment on site, anything that is being maintained in a facility at a fixed area. Those areas, of course, you are draining oil, you're moving fluids within without that equipment. Whatever those cases may be, you're looking at the potential for oil to spill, fuel to spill, other automotive fluids, hydraulic fluids, cooling fluids, whatever those fluids may be within those equipment and vehicle maintenance areas. Always a potential for a spill there. Usually contained, usually stays within the area that's being maintained, but if there are floor drains that happen to lead to a navigable waterway, that could be a vulnerable point for you. Washing and cleaning areas are another one that can sometimes get us into trouble, especially if we've got a lot of things that we are doing mobily. So if you are moving big equipment or vehicles within a construction facility, before those things leave, you need to clean the wheels off. Or if you are cleaning parts within an area, if you've got mobile cleaning operations, those can be areas that are vulnerable. If we do those in fixed facilities and we have an area dedicated to those, that's great. But when we do have those operations going on manually or going on in a mobile operation, they can be a situation where they are potentially leading us to having those violations or having those discharges. Loading and unloading areas. This, for some facilities, for a fixed facility, could be a loading dock. For mobile facilities or construction areas, this could be just an area that's set up maybe around the perimeter of the facility. Anytime you're doing those bulk operations and moving fluids of any type, that leads to a vulnerability and a potential for anything to get into the environment. So look at those areas, whether they're marked on your facility maps or not, and determine where they might be, because they, like other things, may have that higher potential for a spill or for a release. And waste treatment, storage, and disposal areas. So this would be anywhere that you're collecting your recyclables, anywhere that you are storing your waste before it leaves your facility to go to a landfill or to go for incineration or fuels blending. Any of those areas where those fluids are collecting, or even possibly where solids are collecting. Are they well maintained? Do they have something around them? Are they bermed? Are the containers that you're using in good condition? Having those things in place can help prevent that waste material from being released into the environment before it is treated or stored or taken off site for storage, whatever it may be. And finally, raw material piles. In this situation, in this photo, I have some shale that could get loose, but this could easily be soil, it could be sawdust, it could be a salt pile, whatever those raw materials are that are kept outside. If they're not kept under cover, that can be a problem for us, because if it's not under cover and we have a good rainstorm or a good snow melt, whatever the case may be, that can cause that pile to start moving and heading toward drains. So something that we may not think of when we think of spills, but it is something that can cause a release that could violate a permit. All right, so looking at those, none of those should really be a surprise for you. They, as I mentioned, most of them should be marked on your facility plans, but all of those things that do allow or do cause us to potentially have a release within our facility. So let's look at what we can do to minimize some of the potentials for those releases within those different areas that we may have identified in our plan. So the first one is preventative maintenance. And again, this shouldn't be a surprise to all of us, something that sometimes we take for granted, sometimes, especially now with labor forces being at a premium, sometimes we may put off that preventative maintenance a little bit longer than we used to. But look at those areas within your facility where preventative maintenance can help you prevent a release. So vehicles and equipment, a primary one, that's something that we looked at, those saddle tanks that were in poor condition or hydraulic systems, whatever those things may be, that the longer we let them go, the higher the chance is for those to cause a problem and cause a spill or cause a release. Pipelines, we looked at those, especially with the fittings and the connections, valves, taps, anywhere that you're accessing that fluid or where that fluid has the potential to get out. And they're a big one that we can overlook because we kind of rely on them to do their thing from day to day and week in, week out. But when we don't maintain those properly and we don't inspect them properly, they can cause that potential for a lot of fluid to get out very quickly. Equipment we talked about, and hydraulic systems we already talked about as well. But what is it at your facility that can be maintained, that should be maintained, and what are the schedules for those, and are we keeping up with them? Those, just that simple act of performing that preventative maintenance can help us to prevent that spill and be aware of it. And if we need to take things offline, scheduling that so that we can do that work at a time that's convenient rather than having a release or rather than having a spill that wasn't predicted and now kind of takes us out of whatever else we need to be doing for the day in order to take care of that emergency situation. The next one are performing your routine inspections. Another one that can tend to get overlooked, especially as we're fighting for the ability to get everything done in a day. It's kind of easy to say, okay, well, you know what, I'll inspect that tomorrow. But when we do have our due diligence and we are very diligent about performing those inspections on all of the different areas where materials are stored and where we've got that equipment, where we've got those containers, where we've got everything kind of in place that we rely on for our operations, performing those inspections, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, sometimes a few of them are only an annual inspection. But when we do those things and we document them, we have those records, we can kind of begin to see patterns forming. So as we're doing those inspections, do them in a way that causes people to need to look for the answer. So when we use a checklist for inspections, and I know a lot of us do, we can tend to kind of pencil whip that and say, oh yeah, everything looks great. But if we require measurements or if we require something, so for example, if we're looking in a secondary containment area, does it have water or not? Yes or no? That's an easy question, but look for different things that you can add into your inspections that make somebody quantify what those things are. So if you're looking at containers, what's the level in the container? If you're looking in the fueling areas, what did the valve look like? Adding questions or adding components to those inspections can help us to predict what might be happening. So if we see changes over time, that can be a prediction that can be an indication that something needs to happen. That could be an indication that we need to perform that preventative maintenance so that we don't have those releases. So look at your inspection forms for whatever you're inspecting, whether it be the areas that are listed here, or if there are other areas that you regularly perform inspections. Maybe it's the inspection of your storm drains every spring. While you're doing that, okay, how much of the concrete around the area has degraded? How much sediment is in the bottom of the drain? Whatever those things may be, actually have something there that people have to fill in versus having just a plain checklist to help you predict what might need to happen before you have a release. Good housekeeping. This is another one that shouldn't cost a lot of money because it should be something that is done daily or at least weekly or sometimes monthly, whatever the case may be. seasonally. Whatever those housekeeping practices are, chances are these are already listed in your plan. These are probably your BMPs, or best management practices. These are things that people are doing as part of their daily activities. This is something that shouldn't take a lot of time. Just 5 or 10 minutes a day should be able to help you keep up your facility so that you don't have to have large housekeeping events quarterly or annually, whatever the case may be. Having those housekeeping issues in place and making them part of your daily routines will help your employees to not only prevent spills, but also help them to perform their jobs more safely. If you don't have a lot of clutter in the workplace, you don't have to spend time looking for things because you'll be able to find what you need a lot more easily. For drivers, it's going to help them to be able to maneuver around the facility without looking around piles of clutter or unexpected things within their path. So performing this good housekeeping, nobody likes to do it. Nobody likes to tidy up after themselves, but that housekeeping is something that probably is already listed in your plan, probably already doing. And when we are diligent about keeping up with it, can really help us to prevent spills because the clutter isn't around there, taking up space, taking up time, and potentially hiding those other things that we need to see in order to have that prevention in place. Just some different housekeeping measures that we can do. Sweeping and vacuuming. When we perform the sweeping and vacuuming operations, we're keeping things out of the drains. We're keeping that sediment from getting into the drains anytime it rains, or possibly being kicked in or moved in through tires. Collecting your trash, keeping your dumpster lids closed, just all things that are probably in your plan. Nothing should be out of the ordinary here, but they will help us to maintain that orderly workplace and keep everything in check. The next thing is utilizing drip pans for persistent drips. So this is where you do possibly have a pipeline, or you've got valves or fittings, or maybe it's just the nature of the equipment itself. It needs to be highly oiled or highly lubricated in order to work, and you're simply not going to prevent a drip from happening. So looking for those areas, looking for those items where this could be a potential problem, and putting pans or some kind of collection device in that area to make sure that it's not hitting the ground. So this might be placing a pan under a generator, or placing a sheet of absorbent under pumps. Wherever those areas are, identify them. And you're probably going to have some kind of telltale sign letting you know that a persistent leak is a problem. It could be a stain on the ground. It could be dead vegetation near an area. Whatever that indication is, look for it and go back to the source. Look for what is causing it, and put something in place there so that you're preventing that from hitting the ground and you're keeping that in check. The next thing is secondary containment berms. And this is something that like I said, we usually see this around a tank. We usually see these around large areas where bulk liquids are stored. We might see it around a fueling area, but look for other areas where you might benefit from a secondary containment system. So this might be around the perimeter of an equipment storage area. If you've got a lot of portable equipment that's stored outdoors and it doesn't make sense to move it all inside, perhaps putting a berm around that area. Maybe you have fluctuating inventory levels and you get a lot of equipment or tools or supplies or product in for a job and then it goes away. There are a lot of different ways to do secondary containment now. It can be done with earthen berms. It can be done with portable systems. There are a lot of neat things that are happening with secondary containment that have developed over the past 5 years that allow you to prepare those areas and keep things contained so that in the event that there is a spill, a leak, or a drip, it's contained. Now, you haven't done anything to really prevent it, but other than preventing the release, but it's a lot easier to clean up a contained spill than it is to clean up something that has gotten all over the facility versus in a confined area. So look for opportunities for that. Even if they're not in your plans now, it is a nice way to supplement, or when you're updating your plans, to add in different areas that are bermed for those different equipment or product storage. And providing covers. This is important for anything that can be stored outside and can be undercover. It may not make sense for bulk salt piles. It may not make sense for bulk shale, or it may not make sense for a bulk sand pile, whatever those things might be. But look for other things that you can provide coverage for. For example, containers that are stored outside, portable tanks, generators, equipment that is just commonly messy. Anything that you can provide cover for is going to help you prevent it from being affected anytime that it rains or anytime you have a large snowmelt event. So look for things that you can put in place. And one way to do that is to consolidate your storage areas. So instead of allowing product to be stored all over the place, have a designated area and put a cover over it and make that the area where things are stored and located, so that you do have that cover and you do have that additional level of protection. And look for ways to provide infiltration. So this may be adding vegetated areas. This may be looking at areas that aren't currently in use that you could return to a state where they have grass and where they have different vegetation. Anytime that we can allow water from a paved surface to infiltrate into soil before it goes into a waterway is great, because it kind of adds that level of filtration to it. And also it allows that water to return to the environment in a little more of a natural way. So look for ways that this is something that probably would be a larger project, where a lot of the other things that we looked at were more things that could be implemented daily or things that could be implemented very quickly. This is something that may take a little more time, but anytime that we can have an infiltration as opposed to directing things to a storm drain that directly goes to a waterway, it's better for the environment, and something that can also really help you with your plans, because you have that ability to allow the infiltration as opposed to having that flow going out of your facility every time it rains. Catch basin inserts. This is something that we are seeing used a lot more, both for companies, facilities, and also at the municipality level, also for any kind of commercial operations. And catch basin inserts are just a way to help you kind of at that final point before something leaves your facility. If you don't have a retention pond, if you don't have any kind of an underground storage vault or something where your water from a paved area is going before it leaves your facility, catch basin inserts are just that last ditch effort to capture something before it might leave and get into a waterway. Great because they can capture silt and sediment, they can capture trash, they can capture oil sheens. There are also things available with catch basin inserts that can help you collect heavy metals or organics or other pollutants that may be of a concern for you, possibly something that you're not currently meeting within your permit. Catch basin inserts are a way to possibly capture that before it becomes a problem for you and before it becomes something that could cause you to violate your permit. Great because they can be put over the drains in areas that don't have a lot of traffic or under the drains. And they're really coming a long way now that they're a lot more easily maintained than they used to be. So this is something that we are seeing a lot more of, and we're seeing a lot of need for within facilities and within municipalities, just to help with that effort so that it's a lot easier to maintain your catch basins and also helping prevent that pollution downstream. Fueling areas. We talked about this, and some of the good housekeeping things that you can do there is to have policies in place to help people, or to enforce and to help. Let me start that again. To help people to maintain that area better, to avoid topping off. It's something that really doesn't add a lot to fuel. You're not getting that much more fuel, that you're going to go that much further on the road anyway if you top off. And also it helps to prevent that topping off from burping back out of the tank and getting onto the ground. Removing the locking devices. So this is if you're able to pull up the handle on the fuel dispensing valve and then flip down the level and walk away, that can be a problem, because if it doesn't stop in time, you're going to have an overflow and you're going to have a mess to clean up. And when you do have a spill, looking for dry ways to clean it up. And dry methods are usually absorbents. That can be an absorbent pad, it might be loose absorbents, whatever you've got there to clean up the spills. Having that material readily available at the fuel dispensing area so that people are able to take care of it immediately and not just hosing that down to the nearest drain. These are all best management practices that we should be familiar with and will help us in those areas to prevent that release from getting into a drain. And snow management. This is something seasonal, probably more for northern folks than for people in the south. But where do we put our snow piles? How do we manage those? Are they in an area that will allow us to capture all the sediment? So here that you can see this pile is kind of dirty, a lot of sediment in that. If we don't have a way to, if we're just taking that snow and putting it into an area where there's soil, all of that sediment is going to kind of get into the soil, and that's going to inhibit the soil from allowing water to infiltrate eventually. So having a way to manage that and knowing where you're putting those piles can really help you to maintain the sediment that's in them and keep it out of your waterways, and also capture any trash that might be in there. So if it happens to pick up leaves or soda cups, whatever it may be, having your snow all in a dedicated area and making sure that area is well maintained, and especially after the snow does melt, will help you with keeping that out of drains and keeping that from polluting the environment. So how can we prepare these areas? Now we've identified them, we've looked at some of the preventative measures, but we all know that even with the best prevention, spills can happen. And that's why when you look at your SWIP or you look at your SPCC plan, there's always an element for spill prevention and for spill response within those plans. So let's look at a few of the ways that we can be prepared in some of those areas so that when those spills happen, we can have our frontline workers take care of them or be ready for them in those areas so that they don't become a bigger problem. So some things that you can do before a spill happens. Look at those site maps. And again, they're a great resource. When you're looking at your SWIP and you're looking at your SPCC plans, those areas that we've talked about, with the exception of possibly moving equipment or mobile operations, those things should have the places where these fuels or these oils or the pollutants are already stored on the map. So where are those tanks? Where are those containers? Where are the pipelines? Where are the fueling areas? Where are fluids being transferred? Find those places and find the different things around them where the release could happen. Is there a ditch near the area? Is there a drain near the area? Where are the vulnerable locations? Look at those on the map, outline them, highlight them, know where they are, because if we don't know where they are, we don't know where to be prepared. So where are those things? Mark them on the maps if they're not already there. And a lot of municipalities and a lot of states, those things are actually required on your site maps anyway. So that homework may already be done for you. Training. What can you train your people to do? Look at the best management practices that are outlined in your plans. And how do they apply to the different people who are throughout your facility? Do your operators know why those BMPs are in place? Do they know why they're doing something? Are there things that they need to do differently? Are there things that are being overlooked? Are they performing those inspections? Are they turning those inspections in? Are they letting people know that they found something out of the ordinary when they did their inspection? So what are those things that they need to be doing, and have they been taught to do them properly? So if you are going to implement a procedure or a policy that says we're not allowed to top off your tanks, what are you doing to enforce that? How are people going to know that that's now a new policy? Can you put up signs in the area? Can you have somebody monitoring the area? What are you going to do to help ensure that they've been taught that and that the training is being reinforced? What are the good housekeeping measures that each person needs to do every day? It's easy to say, oh, we've got a good housekeeping measure in place that we take out the trash at the end of every shift. All right, we take out the trash, but who's doing that and where is the trash going? Have people been taught to do that? Do they know how to prevent spills? Do they know what procedures are in place to help them prevent the spill from happening in the first place? Do they know how to respond to spills? How long has it been since they've trained on that? How long has it been since we've had a drill on spill response? Do they even know where the spill kit is? That's something that I found in 25 years there as I go through facilities. People don't know where the spill kit is. They haven't used it. They haven't needed it, thankfully, but it's buried underneath a pile of something. It's kept underneath a cabinet or locked in a storage area. They can't access it. And many times, more often than not, actually, they don't even know where those spill response materials are. So the more visible that we can make those and the more often we can have people train and drill on using those, the more likely they are to be able to find them and use them properly when there is a spill and when they do need to use them. And also, do they know who to report a spill to, even if it's a small spill? Think of spills almost the same way that you would a safety incident or a near miss. So, okay, I had a small spill. It was only 5 gallons. I contained it, I cleaned it up, and I've got my bag of spill-related waste, and I'm going to take that and put it in the designated area. If I don't tell anybody about that, they don't know that a spill happened. They don't know that they need to restock the kit. They don't know that there's now waste that needs to be taken care of. So having those reporting notifications in place is going to help everybody to be better prepared in the future, and also help to identify areas where you might need to make improvements or you might need to make changes to a best management practice that's in place so that those spills aren't happening in the future. So look at that almost like a safety near miss and look for ways that you can use that to improve something so that you're not having spills in an area again. Okay, at this time, we have some time allotted for questions and answers, and Mike's going to help me with that. But as we prepare, just to kind of sum up, looking at your facility plans and having ways to be better prepared and more diligent about having those inspections will help us to be prepared and help us to prevent those different things that we can do. So look for ways around your facility that you can put those procedures in place if they're not already there, and also look for ways that we can better train our workers to, because they are often the first ones on site. They're the ones who are going to see those spills and respond to those spills first. Ways that we can help them to be able to perform those tasks readily and know what to do after the fact as well, to keep those things in place so that they are always ready. Mike, do we have any questions from the audience at this time?
Karen, I don't see any.
Okay. All right. If we don't have any questions, we will be sending everyone an email at the end of the webinar, and we'll have a link to request a certificate of attendance if you would like that for your records. And we'll also have a copy of the webinar available as well. Mike or Troy, anything that you guys would like to add at the end here?
No, we will post a link in the chat for the email to request certificates.
Here's a question.
Oh, we have a question.
What about non-liquid spills?
What about non-liquid spills? Non-liquid spills are a big thing. So this could be sand, this could be soil, this could be plastic pellets. I see Peter chimed in there. Thanks, Peter, for that. Yeah, plastic pellets are actually one that is being more heavily regulated now. So that's something, if you do have plastic pellets that you're using to make polymers or to make different plastic molds, the EPA is looking into that a little more heavily than they used to. So anything that you've got that can move, it doesn't always have to be a liquid, but sediment is something that it's the #1 pollutant that we do see. So things to keep in mind there when you are storing those things, if you can cover it in any way. So this could be putting a roof over it. This could be even just throwing tarps over it. putting it within a secondary containment area. There are portable secondary containment systems. If you have the ability to put it in one of those, anything that you can do to keep that from moving and keep that in a confined space will help to prevent it from getting into a waterway. So that is something that, again, we don't traditionally think of when we think of spills or releases. We don't think about those solid products getting into the environment, but they are the #1 pollutant, and definitely something that we do need to keep in mind especially when we're storing those outside. And sweeping, having a diligent program to keep anything that gets tracked, swept up. Again, not fun, but something that will help us to keep those things out of drains and keep them out of waterways. Great reminder, Peter. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for their time today. And again, look for that email. If you have any other questions, we'd be glad to address those. And also certificates and a copy of the presentation will be ready for us probably by the end of the week. Thanks again.